Greetings, Janelle. This is your critique for your final portfolio for Art 828 Creative Photography. When I first look at these images, I'm just kind of overwhelmed by the visual movement, the linear quality, the movement of all of these images collectively together. I also note that I think you did a good job of, one of my earlier criticisms of first looking at this was to find a reorganization for things, and I think you've actually found a fairly pleasing reorganization of the work. You've spread out the more saturated images with desaturated, then back to saturated and desaturated, and there seems to be a nice ebb and flow as I look at this, and it helps me focus in on the work itself instead of being just a little overwhelmed, maybe. Yeah, and the other thing I start looking at when I look at the work, you talk about some contemporary photographers, Jeff Wall, which I totally relate to. I think other people you could relate to, or another person you could relate to, is Jennifer Bolland, and in particular, I don't know, this globe series where she goes around and photographs globes. I think we have more things, but more images. I strongly relate your work to this, and in general, there's a chapter in a book called The Photograph as Contemporary Art by Charlotte Cotton called Something and Nothing, and that jumped immediately to my mind when I looked at the images today. Give me another place to look to find photographers doing the similar thing. What you're doing is you're focusing on these sort of mundane, everyday objects, and in particular rope and knots, and looking at them, and you've found a wonderful variety of them, and I think you've also presented them in an interesting manner. But this image, like me, I think is a good one to start off with. It is bold, it is contrasty in value and in hue. The blue of the water and the sky and the boats. And I like how this is just slightly softer in focus, and this is sharp. And you have this nice hard light, and you see the texture of the rope and the texture of this pure, and the juxtaposition. It's almost divided in half here, left, right. It's kind of interesting. I think I like, in the end, like this little bit of reality here. I thought, well, what if we crop that off? But it becomes almost too stark and half and kind of jarring. So that adds a nice little element in there, and you can see the nice rope movement and the knot created. And we move on to this image, which is much less saturated, fairly overall neutral, and we can really focus in on the texture and just the linear movement of these ropes as they flow along, and then the texture of the wood and the docks, and a little bit of the natural tree back there kind of helps too. This has a nice shadow. I think the shadow really helps this, because if it was just the rope on the wood, it would just kind of get lost and just be this sort of light brown nothingness. But the shadow really helps it pop and adds another dimension to this whole thing, and really exaggerates the fluid lines of these ropes. And ropes on a boat are so important. Knots in boating, sailing are so important. Knowing them, knowing how to use them, when to use them, and a proficiency in doing them quickly can be very valuable as well, as I'm sure you're learning. But I like this photograph quite a bit. It's different. The other ones have space, and this feels, in a sense, very flat because it is. But it's not just because the focal plane is flat, but it's also, very similar in value, not too contrasty. One thought I had was like, what if I punched up this shadow and really, I don't think I want to do that. I kind of like the softness in there. It helps exaggerate the movement, keep me thinking about that rope, and then juxtaposed nicely with the wood. And then you got this image. The other one feels much more organic, because we have a more organic rope and more natural wood. And here we have this very nylon, almost technology-driven sort of rope, and these bright fluorescent colors, and we have it on this metal and this cleat. And the wood here looks, is natural, but seems very, finished in a sense. I really like this black bar here. This is reminding me of a Mondrian composition sort of thing. We have our yellow, we have our blue, and we have our red. though we do have organic lines in here, but the outside of the rope, I love how the organicness of those lines is juxtaposed by this very precise grid and rectangular areas, long rectangular lines in the wood and this negative space in the black. It's a really nice composition with just some rope. You know, again, here we shift back to something where everything is much more organic. The rope itself feels more organic. Though it also looks like it could be a nylon rope, but it feels more organic, looks weathered, has algae and growth on it. And the wood is more natural and weathered. We have diagonal lines going this way, and the organic movement and sort of radial movement of the rope that way. So, and this again has another feeling of organicness, but also we kind of snap back a little bit. I'm trying to decide if I want to like square this up because you have this little bit of grid. This angle's just off a little bit, but I think I kind of like it off a little bit. You know, it doesn't have that newness of that image we saw a couple images ago of that shiny steel, plasticky, very machined feel. I kind of like this slight off angle here, and then the rope moves there, and I like we create this triangular negative form here between the reflection and that rope, and you know the straightness of that, and also some precision there, and then the looseness of it. There's a lot of variety just within the rope itself, and then the supporting negative space visual elements work too. So another way you're giving me variety, and we've already talked this a little bit, but we looked at these very close-up ropes, but now here I have this close-up of this rope, but I also get to see in the environment. If I go back here, this has a much flatter feel to it. But now here I have space. I'm still able to focus, and this can be such a challenge, still able to focus on the subject that you want me focusing on this rope, and I like the contrast between this and this metallic cable. But at the same time, you still bring me into the environment of where this is all happening in the marina. And so I see the water, and I see the sailboats, and I see the sky and trees, but they're slightly out of focus. So, and the sharpness here lets me focus on this while still appreciating and contextualizing the environment of which it exists. And then we have nice cast shadow here on this. I do almost wish that this was sharper. I don't know how this is out of focus. Maybe it's just back just far enough from this where that's out of focus. I almost wish that were sharper. That kind of is distracting me. But again, I like the shadow and the textures because I like the texture of the rust versus the painted, and the shadow on how that integrates. I'd like to more closely associate it to what's going on here in this metal, in this rope. But it's just slightly out of focus, so I want to sharpen that, but at the same time, if I do that, it will also sharpen the negative space, so I'm not sure what the best answer is here, if there's a balance, or if we need to take two photographs and Photoshop them together later. Yeah, it can be complicated. All right, so this is, again, a much simpler composition. Less color, less space, more flat, but a lot of fluid movement. Also, the light is really gorgeous on this rope. I just like these subtle highlights that happen right there and here. So much texture in there, in a very narrow sort of contrast range. There's lots of little values in that range and textures. And then it's contrasted nicely by these darker textures, rougher textures of this weathered wood. But again, another flat composition. This one, has some flatness, except for this thing feels like it's jutting out at me. Haven't seen that, haven't gotten that feel in any of the other images. And I also really like, though, I get more sense of space up here. Down here it's flat, but up here I get this sense of space. I got this thing jutting out at me, and then there's water, and it's not that far away from it, but I get that sky reflected, and clouds reflected. And that adds a really almost deep space there. I'd almost be wanting to go back here and edit this, just the sky, and maybe add a little more depth, a little more contrast and depth to it. I'm curious to see how that affected the image. I do feel like some of the highlights get blown out here and here. See, this is really nice here, but I want to back off on those highlights just a little bit there. And you could try and do it in Photoshop or GIMP or something like that. A better tool might be Camera Raw or Lightroom would be good, where we can just deal with the sliders, highlight sliders, and we could back off, because these are, I would say, blown out technically. So they're just, I'm guessing, clipped values that there's no information. But we can sometimes reclaim those values in programs like Lightroom or Camera Raw. Photoshop doesn't do a very good job of reclaiming values, but we can manufacture and bring it down in value. I like this. This is such a bold composition, and so like just these yellow lines moving across these very hard-edged vertical wood. The wood itself, it creates this almost human-made grid, but then it still maintains those naturalistic qualities of wood, which have been enhanced by the weathering of it and the organic feel that brings together. I like this subtle shadow, creating this triangular form. Again, it also goes along with the lines here. And then we have these contrasts. But it's also soft and subtle. Like, it totally feels harmonious to me. But we also get this boom, boom, and then this light going across, and the organicness, yet at the same time precision of that rope, and then a little bit of water. It is a very, very nice composition. I actually like that one quite a bit. Here again, you bring me back to space. The previous one was a very flat feel, and now you're bringing me space. So you can see you have this nice push and pull in how you've organized these images. Some space, some flat, back to space. And I think that really keeps me engaged as a viewer, where if you just put all the flat ones together and all the spatial ones together, I'd be like, man, I feel just too disconnected. But mixing them up actually makes them feel more organic and whole and a part of this body of work. And then the light here, I think again is just maybe a titch blown out and could be brought back. But again, you're giving me variety, you're giving me more organic lines and movements, and the texture of the water, and the sky reflected in that, and the boat there. It's a nice composition. It really is amazing the variety that you've given me in just a simple subject as rope and knots. That's nice. It doesn't sound like an exciting portfolio. I'm going to go photograph ropes and knots. And people are going to be like, woo, okay, you have a good time. But you know what? You've really come across with a lot of variety here and a lot of different interesting ways to do that. And I think it doesn't do it justice still when I look at all of them together. They kind of like just kind of blur together. But when I get into them individually, there's such a nice variety and such texture, and that just happens. I don't think there's any way to reorganize things in Flickr. But just a reminder to pay attention to the details and don't just judge things from afar. You've got to get closer to them. Makes me think about how they would be best presented. What their best size would be. Would these be better as large prints? Or maybe they'd be better as small prints, where the viewer is forced to get up and get close and intimately interact with these things. Or maybe they would be shown off better large. I don't know that I have an answer, but I always think in terms of print, which maybe is a negative thing in this day and age, where most photographs are probably viewed via screens, and it's just so hard to control how the viewer sees it. The size, even colors, can be changed. This image has, again, nice variety, organic, mechanical, rectilinear lines, and there's a very much more elaborate knot here. You can see I begin to appreciate the knot. I'm not much of a sailor. Most of my time spent on the water is canoes, but I have done quite a bit of fly fishing, and that also gets very intricate into the knot making. So I can appreciate the time and effort to learn these things and to execute them. And I've done a teeny bit of sailing with a friend of mine who lives out in Nakatawa, Michigan, so he's on a marina. Anyway. I like the subject matter, but I like the diversity with how you are approaching it and finding it and looking at it. And I can appreciate the individual knots, but I also appreciate the elements that you're bringing in around them. So this is maybe one of the less exciting ones, though, except I do like the contrast between blacks and different textures. And maybe even like zooming in on something like this. Completely incidental, but maybe that almost pushes that that difference further. And then I also noticed that leaf behind right there, which I didn't even really see before. So maybe we just need to crop this one a little bit more. Also, I want to, the angle, you can see that you're at a slight angle photographing this because we get this slight convergence here. I want those perfect, straight up and down, you know, as we can. So that could be done in Photoshop too. So. Oh, here's the nice coiled rope, and then I like the boat and the reflected in the background, but I don't see the actual boat, I just see the reflection, and then the nice precision, you know, sailors can be so precise with how they're laying things out, and that order helps the whole process of sailing go much smoother, and I think that's all exhibited here. There's both this interaction with the water and the organic and the earth and feeling the wind and, you know, the spray, but also that need for that human order to make things move efficiently and safely. So, yeah, in here you're introducing a pulley, which is not, we have not seen before, and then, but I really like how you're bringing all these things together. Just this diagonal here, the circle here, the pulley lines here, the water snaking in and out of the water and up onto the dock here. You know, so much variety in such a what we might see as a simple, mundane subject, and you've really, you know, created a lot of things to look at here. So well done, Janelle. You know, good job in the class. Thanks for taking it. I hope you got something out of it. If you have any questions, let me know.